Regarding Men, number 16, Misandrist Buses.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Paul Leland with a Voice for Men, and I am joined, as always, for this Regarding Men discussion by Tom Golden of menaregood.com and Janice Fiamingo of the famous Fiamingo Files. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're coming off the heels of a discussion of feminist lies. And one of the biggest feminist lies that we discussed and that should always be discussed is the myth of women's lack of violence, the idea that only men are violent. And we have two utterly tragic stories this week to discuss, both of them happening on buses. Go figure, just within a short period of each other, two men were killed. One man was killed in a town called Logan, Utah, after a young woman, 17 or 16 years old, said he had sexually assaulted her on the bus, summoned her brother, who promptly knocked the man down to the concrete as he was getting off the bus. The head trauma killed him. Video was released of the incident on the bus. It turned out to be not an incident. The man walked right past her on the bus, never touched her, nothing was exchanged, moved on with his life, and ended up dying for his trouble. Another comes out of the city of Las Vegas, Nevada, where a 74-year-old man on a walker was on a bus. He got into a verbal exchange with a woman there, and she apparently had been yelling and screaming at other passengers and cursing at them. And he told her, "You ought to be more nice to people." And then he went to exit the bus, and she used both hands to shove him forcefully off the bus. He flew through the air, hit the pavement, and was dead less than a month later. His head, they measured, was 8 feet from the base of the bus. So he traveled some distance in the air. That's the force she shoved him with. He hit the ground. You can see the video. We'll link to it below. Absolutely horrible incidents, both of them. And one's, honestly, I really have to caution I have to work with myself not to say what I impulsively want to say about these people doing this thing. I will say about the Las Vegas story before I pass the buck on to Tom and Janice. Yes, Tom first, because I'm gynocentric. But one of the things that really bothers me, among so many things to bother you about the Vegas story, is that the woman was not arrested immediately. They waited till the guy died. Now, what typically happens in a lot of these cases is you have somebody that violently assaults somebody, commits a crime, attacks them, hurts them tremendously. They go ahead and make an arrest and charge with something like aggravated assault to get them off the street. And this woman did have a history of violence. She had been arrested before. So they had every reason.
Domestic violence.
Yes, domestic violence, the kind women don't commit.
Yes.
They had a history of her doing this. They did not arrest her at all. They let her go free. And then they started looking for her after the guy died. And okay, I'm glad they arrested her. I'm glad she's been charged with murder. I do not trust the court system to deliver justice in this in any way, form, or fashion. It also should be mentioned that this woman was Black, not because that matters to me at all, but because in this atmosphere of victim politics and victim outcomes in trials, I'm afraid of leniency for that reason too, both for being female and for being a minority. And I wonder if this wasn't the reason that they failed to arrest. I wonder if they would have ever arrested her. So let's say the guy recovered and lived and had debilitating injuries after that. Would they have arrested her? We don't know. We'll never know, because they didn't arrest her when they had her on camera committing this horrible, horrible crime. So anyway, with that, I will pass the buck to Janice.
Yeah, well, thanks, Paul. I mean, I don't really have anything more to say other than what you've already touched on, really. Watching that video is sobering for so many reasons. And then researching her story and finding out that, yeah, she has a whole history of domestic violence. She was arrested in 2013, I think, a year later than that, a number of occasions. And in every case, she's been given anger management counseling and had suspended sentences and all sorts of things. And watching the video in particular, this is a really scary woman, and yet when she pushed that man, we don't see the long-term aftermath, but in the immediate aftermath, it's really striking. Nobody does anything at all, neither to help the man who has just been thrown off the bus and is lying motionless at the exit, nor to do anything to the woman. And I'm sure that if the situation were reversed and a man had viciously pushed a woman off a bus, everybody would have both rushed to help the woman. It's really striking in the video that that does not happen. And I would expect that they would have tried to lay hands on that man in order to make sure that he could be arrested and held to account for his violent act. Everyone just looked kind of surprised, but not really particularly upset about it.
Yep.
It's just really stunning. So here we go again. You know, we simply cannot, despite our endless discussions about how gender stereotypes should not condition how we respond to men and women, we simply can't get past this idea that women are incapable of heinous violence. And I do think, when you come to a thing like this, on the one hand, one can say, well, men and women are both capable of violence. We know that violence is not a gender issue. We're very capable of seeing the fact that men can be violent. Nobody's ever tried to deny that. Okay, so let's recognize that women can be violent as well. But I do also wonder whether the feminist insistence that women can't hurt anybody, on top of our already gynocentric, belief in female innocence, whether this has actually made the problem worse in some way. And I think of all the articles that I've read over the past couple of years in particular, arguing that women are, from a feminist perspective, women are essentially harmless. I think of an article by everybody's favorite feminist columnist, Jessica Valenti, who published an article a few years ago, I think it was 2015, and it's called "Feminists Don't Hate Men, but It Wouldn't Matter If We Did." And so she basically goes in the article to say that, to admit that feminists do hate men, but it doesn't matter. And her line is that, and she steals this, I think, from feminist writer Margaret Atwood. Her line is something like, when women hate men, we hurt their feelings. But when men hate women, they kill us. And that's the sort of thing that you hear over and over again, that men's hatred has these horrific consequences for women in terms of broken bones and ended lives. Whereas it doesn't matter when women hate men. So go ahead and do it, because women never harm men. And it's that kind of lie, along with, of course, the constant feminist insistence that, that men owe women something, that women have suffered so much under a male-dominated society, and that therefore women's violence against men is actually in some way justified and not something that should be socially objected to. That in fact, it can be condoned in some way. Now, maybe that's too much to apply to these individual incidents, but certainly the other case that you mentioned, Tom and Paul, sorry, I do know who you two guys are. I can keep you. Sorry about that. The other
since he grew a beard, it's got me confused too. So.
Everything got screwed up.
Sorry. I'm sorry. That's terrible. We got to bleep that out. But anyway,
No.
The other case that you mentioned about the girl, 16-year-old girl, I think she was, who contacted her brother, and said, go after this guy.
Right.
In that case, it's hard not to believe that the hysteria around Me Too, the hysteria around women as sexual victims, and the constant reiteration that women are so brave for coming forward, women are so brave for calling out and talking about their experiences and calling out men and raising awareness and all of that. That's got to have played into this girl's sense that it's somehow a heroic thing to claim victimhood and, to set her brother on this man who maybe brushed against her as he went by or something, and she made a big deal out of it, as women are wont to do. So I am really concerned, not only about the fact that we won't admit that women can be violent, but that we're constantly suggesting that women can't hurt men and therefore are never really responsible for it when they do. Very concerning.
Yeah, it's interesting. Why is it that women can't hurt men? And I think it all boils down to the fact that men's pain is taboo.
Yeah.
And feminists can use this idea to ignore the pain of men. Because the culture literally ignores the pain of men already.
Yeah.
So when that guy gets pushed out of the bus, he's laying there flat-faced, dead, or will be dead soon, on the sidewalk, people don't budge. Men's pain is taboo. A woman's pain is a call to action. When women have something wrong, everyone wants to scurry around and fix it. When guys have something wrong, they're expected to take care of it themselves or just shut the fuck up, So it's a very different kind of thing. And of course, you can't hurt these guys. They don't have pain, at least that we can see. And so I think that's a part of what's going on with this. But I think there's a whole lot more than that. I think, the thing that catches my eye about this is that the media and feminists have been pushing the idea for 50 years that there's something wrong with men and they're terrible and they're the cause of problems, etc. And when someone causes problems, what kind of veneer do they have around them? Very thin and very negative. And so the more people have pushed this idea that men are bad, that there's something wrong with men, the more it basically makes men in danger of being hurt by a culture that wants to do them in. You see it in spades in the young people who think that men have been somehow these terrible guys, and the women are owed something for this. And that men are these bad folks. It's okay to push him down the stairs. He's a bad guy. God, I hate to say it, but it reminds me of Germany in the 1930s. When if you were Jewish or gay or gypsy or handicapped in some way, you really were seen as the problem. And when you see someone as the problem, it makes it much easier then to attack that person and to blame that person and to murder them, in fact. What's interesting is that there were trials in Germany in the 30s for people who murdered Jews. So the government did not want anyone to be able to murder Jews. They wanted to be the only ones. It's an interesting thing where they did keep some control over murder. But even still, there was a sense of what's the word for it? That it's okay. It's okay. They're Jews. They're disposable. Of course, we already know that men are seen as disposable already. And now they're disposable and bad. So what the hell does that do to them? You end up with people like this one pushing the guy down. You end up like the girl on the bus who calls her brother and says, this guy sexually assaulted me. And the brother comes right after the guy gets off the bus. He blindsides him. Boom! Knocks him over and kills him. Wow. This is mind-blowing stuff, really. I can't imagine this going on when I was a little boy. I can't imagine someone would push someone else off a bus and kill them, or call their brother or sister and have them come in and do some harm to someone. It'd be unthinkable. I think there was at least a semblance of an idea that people are worthy just in themselves, And I don't think we have that anymore. I think we've lost that.
I think that's an incredibly important point, Tom. I look back at my childhood and I remember a time that, at least on the basis of being elderly, that if you had a guy with a walker and some woman knocked him over, people would have grabbed her and held her for the police.
Yes.
There was a time, but that was 50 years ago,
Yes.
before we had a constant narrative of men's demonization
Yep.
over and over and over again. And what is so heartbreaking about this, and it is truly heartbreaking, that image of the guy laying flat on top of his walker and a couple of women on the bus doing this, oh my, with their hands, but nobody moving. There's your perfect microcosm of modern society.
Yeah.
That's it. That isn't just a couple of women on the bus or one assaulted person or one old man. That is our entire culture laid out in front of you. When men go down, nobody cares. And it doesn't matter if they're elderly. People just don't mind it so much. And I think because we have constantly drummed into the cultural consciousness of men's unworthiness and their innate evilness, that when things happen to them, there's a part of people that just won't react because, man, that's sort of like killing a rat.
Exactly.
It's really sad, but, you know, rats are a problem.
Yeah, there's too many of them.
Gosh.
Yeah.
I can't imagine in my whole life, honestly, I'm sitting here honestly on the edge of tears about all of this because I never could imagine growing up that I would ever, as a grown man, have this kind of discussion about an old man on a walker getting thrown off a bus to his death and nobody doing anything. And even the person did it, wasn't even arrested. And they had a video. It's amazing to me.
And he was thrown off because he told her to be nicer. It's like, what? Ay.
Yeah, I know. And it's so undeniable that voices advocating hatred on the feminist side of the aisle have been enabled to move from the marginal position that they may have once occupied and should occupy to the mainstream. You can find articles every day on the mainstream news simply advocating hatred, denying that men deserve basic respect or compassion. There's a famous article by Julie Bindel from a couple of years ago called Why I Hate Men. And part of what her whole argument is that men are responsible for all the violence in the world. And she actually says, before you start banging on about how women are, responsible for, or equally responsible for the deaths of children, and how women also participate in domestic violence, she says, that's simply not true. Every reputable study that has ever been done on this subject shows that men are overwhelmingly the perpetrators of violence and sexual violence. Of course, she doesn't show any study. She cites nothing in this article. And there are no reputable studies that would back up what she's saying. Every reputable study that's been done, hundreds and hundreds ever since Murray Strauss did his 1975 national domestic violence survey that showed that women and men were equally likely to report being hit, that women are even a little bit more likely to hit first in cases of domestic violence. And he's since then did all sorts of surveys of hundreds of studies showing that to be true, and showing that, of course, women are as responsible for harming children and even more responsible if you count babies in there, because of course women have more access to babies, but certainly women have the capacity for violence. And so you just have this denial. And Julie Bindel is a major mainstream feminist figure. She's been writing and she's been an activist. She's been the voice of the feminist movement in Great Britain for I don't know how long, 20, 30 years. It's absolutely unimaginable that somebody could attain a position like that, writing outright lies and overt advocation of hatred in that way. And of course, she and her partner have some kind of charity whereby they target women who have been imprisoned for killing men and they attempt to get them off. They're doing that right now, trying to get a particular woman out of jail who killed her ex-husband because she suspected that he was having an affair. She bludgeoned him to death with a hammer, and they've now managed to have her case brought up for reconsideration. She hasn't been let out of jail yet, but or actually she is out of jail right now. I forget her name, and she's awaiting a retrial because they're claiming that she was abused, that he was controlling her, and all that sort of thing. So I mean, it is amazing, Paul. I totally agree that we've come to the point where major respected figures can advocate hatred based on nothing at all, based on their fantasies about men's responsibility for all evil, and that almost nothing happens to them. Their careers are not damaged. They remain opinion makers, leaders in the society, and it would be foolish to imagine that doesn't have an impact.
Yes. And what does this call men to do? Given that scenario, what is it calling us to do as men? Anybody?
Well, I mean, there's honestly, there's no simple answer.
I know.
To that. It would seem to me that if you wanted to blindside tackle somebody, it would have been the woman on her way to pushing that guy off the bus to move defensively. But in a more global picture of this, it's as simple as speaking up forcefully. I mean, one of the things that I really enjoyed back in 2014, Stefan Molyneux's speech at the ICMI, one of the aspects that he got into is that evil never goes away. You always have evil as long as you're going to have humanity, and that it takes different forms, and it's allowed to take a form until society recognizes that it's evil.
Yes.
It was allowed to take the form of slavery, and when society recognized that was an evil, it went away. Then the plain bigotry of Jim Crow, things like that, lived on in another form of evil until society recognized that was evil. We need a society that recognizes that misandry is evil,
Right.
that it is purely as evil as any other form of bigotry, but we also have the complicating factor of gynocentrism that gets in the way of that knowledge.
Exactly.
Because we interpret anybody who says that hating men is wrong, well, you must hate women.
Yes. And that's why I think that one of the alternatives, one of the things men can do is MGTOW. And I think that is protecting yourself as a man. And that's what we really need to start thinking about is, as men, how can we protect ourselves in an environment that is dangerous for us? And one is MGTOW. The other is watching your back. Another is not letting chivalry drive you. Because if you do, you're going to run into trouble.
I think we've got a better shot at that, Tom. I mean, I'm a supporter of MGTOW. I believe that is an option that men need to be educated.
It's one option.
But most men are going to pair bond with women. It's a natural, healthy instinct in us as human beings. But what we don't do is we don't teach men how to screen women appropriately. We don't really teach them anything except how to please women.
Yes.
And this boils down to the onus, and this is sort of an unfair thing, but it's what I believe, is that the onus goes back on men. If you're going to be with somebody that's going to eventually come into your room while you're asleep and cut your penis off,
Oh, God.
which happens to men,
Yes.
you need to screen women better than that. You need to have standards that you take into any relationship. And when you see a woman reacts violently to being disappointed about getting in her way, look, you've got advertising right there. You've got a neon sign blasting in your face and a loudspeaker going off at 110 decibels, get thee away. And men are not trained to even pay attention to that. Matter of fact, we train them to ignore that,
Yes.
and then to try to figure out how do we please this woman.
Yes, exactly. And being able to please her is winning. That's what men see as winning, is when I can please the woman and make her happy, then I've done a good job. They don't think of their own needs as being something that needs to be considered. And I know a place people can learn about that kind of thing, Paul. Do you know a place like that?
Oh, I do. It's called Red Pill Relationships.
Yeah.
And we will have a link for you below to the Patreon. Subscribe, start to that. Tom and I do a weekly program talking about this very topic, men in relationships. It's not a MGTOW discussion. It's a discussion for men who choose to be with women, who want lives with women, but who also don't want to be another walking, talking Gillette commercial.
Really?
So I think the response to this has been really good.
It's great.
We've got some great conversations about this, so we encourage you to do that. You'll also find links to these horrible stories below, and to the man who died in Logan. His name is, I think, Michael Fife.
Michael Fife, yeah.
Yes. There is a GoFundMe for his funeral, so his son can bury him. They are, well, last I checked, we're at like $8,500 thereabouts of a $10,000 goal, which is a cheap funeral these days.
Yes.
So if you want to help out, help bury this guy that was murdered, you can do that with a few shekels in the pot there. I'm sure would be greatly appreciated by the family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And murder, just for information purposes, the grief from murder is completely different from grief from almost anything else, for a 10 to 20 different reasons. But it's really hard on the family, man, when something like this happens. Very, very hard. It's a mess. Ugh.
Nothing good to say about it.
No, not much
Very
anything good
sad.
to say about it.
Yeah, really awful.
Yeah.
Okay, so I
The
think
good news is that men can learn how to take care of themselves better.
yes, they
There
can.
are ways you can do things, guys. You're going to protect yourself in the kind of environment we're in now. And
Lots
so,
of them.
yeah.
I don't think we have necessarily anything, unfortunately, that would have helped either of these men, because they were both sucker punched to death, for
Yeah.
lack of a better word. One of them was blindsided, the other one was caught from behind.
And you
By
got to be a
terrible-
red pill to a degree in order to really start helping yourself. You know, until then, you're an automaton. You're just
Yep.
running on automatic power. You know.
Yeah, but definitely a reason to speak up against the
Yes.
feminists, the mainstream sanctioned hatred of men.
And speak up against the feminists, but also speak up in your relationship.
Yes.
You know, speak up and put your side. Make sure your side is up there for people to see and hear.
Mhm.
Are we about finished, guys?
We have to give out our awards.
Oh yeah, who's gonna get them?
We got our awards. Janice, who is the humanitarian award going to?
Well, we thought we would award Murray Strauss, who is one of the leading researchers into the reality of domestic violence, into the reality of women's responsibility for violence. He was the one who, with a colleague whose name I've forgotten, conducted the 1975 National Domestic Violence Survey. He's written a fantastic article about the attempts by fellow academics to distort the findings of hundreds of studies of the reality of domestic violence that show that women are capable of violence. He's very persuasively analyzed the way that feminist scholars lie about these findings, and we'll include a link to an article, fantastic article that he published at A Voice for Men. And so we think, yes, he deserves our
Murray Strauss, and I think it's almost the 3rd anniversary of his death. So bless his heart.
Yeah, just about to the day. We're very close.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of speaking with him before he died, and even in the face of all, because he got death threats, he got all kinds of reaction. People threatened to bomb places where he was presenting. But he pushed through it all, and he stuck with the truth, and he even allowed us to publish his paper exposing how feminists distort research on A Voice for Men. So,
which is a very
memories of him for that.
It's a very important paper to read, because he literally goes just bit by bit about how feminists have taken research and turned it into something that's a tool to push their narrative rather than push the truth. It's really worth a read.
So he's very deserving.
Oh, he really is. Love him.
Yeah.
Love him. So, Paul, who gets the PUTA?
Who did we do? We give
We
the
thought the 16-year-old girl, whose name, of course, has been shielded
Withheld.
because she's
Along
a
with her brother.
minor, along with her brother. But
Yeah.
that's just horrible. The use of a family member or any man as a proxy for violence, and we see that far too often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
another man dead because of a rape lie.
Yes.
The woman who unfortunately killed the old man on the bus in Vegas, her name is Kadisha Bishop. But like Janice said, they didn't give us the names of either one. They gave us the name of the guy that got killed in Logan, Utah, but both of his killers are protected because of they're younger.
Yeah.
Another one of our greatly archaic.
So we don't have a picture of her, but she'll be the headless PUTA.
Yes, she will be
The headless flying PUTA, the first headless flying PUTA so far. And I'm sure she's going to come in pretty soon, right? Oh,
yes, sure. There she goes.
Goes.
Ooh, you PUTA, you.
Yes, she is.
So we finished?
I think we're finished.
Oh, how about the newsletter?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. One other additional thing.
Exciting.
Look in the days ahead to the Regarding Men newsletter. One of the things that Janice and Tom and I have been discussing, as you have too, given the climate now in social media, the tendency to censor voices like ours, which happens all the time. I mean, I think it's knock on wood that we're still here, even on YouTube. And in thinking about that, what we decided to do was to start a newsletter, a free newsletter that everybody can become a part of. And so that no matter what platform we end up on in the days ahead,
Or get
we'll
cut
be able to
from.
communicate with you and you with us through this newsletter. We'll be able to field questions, and we will be linking to other material. We're doing all kinds of things to books you may want to read, things like that. But mainly this is an opportunity to make sure that we stay connected with you, which is what we want to do in the days ahead. And as many of you as possible in a platform that nobody can take away from us, which is exactly what we've done. We've had help on the back end building this thing scratch from the ground up so that nobody controls it but the three people that you're seeing here on this screen and the one person behind the scenes doing the tech work. But look for that. Hopefully by the next one or two episodes of Regarding Men, we'll have a link for you to sign up for that newsletter and we can get you going.
By the next one. It'll be by the next one.
Okay. If we don't,
Janice says so.
it's his fault. I'm practicing reverse gynocentrism. Just blame me.
Oh, God. So we finished.
I think we're finished.
It's good to be with you all today.
As always, it's been great, guys.
Been great.
You all take care. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.